Okay, I've got 2 o'clock, and we're going to go ahead and Commissioner Roberts is going to do the invocation for us, and Commissioner Campbell is going to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's bow our heads, folks. Oh, Heavenly Father, help us to always seek wisdom and guidance as we navigate life and the many challenges in life. And we have some very interesting discussions going on here today about land preservation and things that can be done. And we just put a hedge of protection around us as we make this discussion and help us to continue to look to you as a source of strength and guidance. And thank you for the leadership of the commission and also all the interested parties here today, and help them to speak the truth with love. And in your glorious name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, and welcome to this Highlands County Board of County Commissioners, Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. It's 2 o'clock, and we're at 600 South Commerce Avenue, Sebring, Florida. This is a special meeting of the Highlands County Board of County Commissioners for the purpose of holding a workshop to establish their priorities for natural resources under the Ridge to River Conservation Planning Study with the North Florida Land Trust. Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Dawn, I suppose we'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Dawn Ritter, Natural Resource Manager here for Highlands County. I'm here with my colleague Sam Erickson. He's the Natural Resource Specialist. So yes, this workshop here is to discuss and determine if a local land conservation should be established here in Highlands County. We are calling that our Ridge to River Conservation Planning Study. So the board did approve the agreement with North Florida Land Trust in November 2024 associated with the Ridge to River Planning Study. And since then, the North Florida Land Trust team, they have done a great job meeting subject matter experts and getting their opinion and threshold in the matter. They'll be able to discuss all of those results later today in this workshop. And then many of the questions asked will also be asked to the board to determine your threshold as well. So this is something that we are very excited for. We think it's going to be a great benefit to Highlands County and can't wait to hear what the residents have to say in the matter. So please meet our North Florida Land Trust team. Allison will be first.
Madam Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Allison DeFore, and as you can tell, my voice is not strong, but my heart is, and I'll be brief. My purpose is to set the table by telling you just a little bit about us and who we are, and give you some assurances from me personally as the President. I am Allison DeFore. This is Ramesh Bush, and that's Heather Nagy. And we have been, as a land trust, at this for 25 years. We have protected about 43,000 acres, and we still own about 15,000. So we are at our core people of the land, and we know the land, and we're very respectful of it, and the people who own it, and the people who help pay for it, the taxpayers. Ramesh, our only purpose in being here is to share with you what we have done in other counties. A total of 27 counties, 28 counties now, have done this in Florida, and we have done those very recently and quite successfully in Nassau and Clay. And we're here to offer you our experience, strength, and hope based upon that experience. If it is helpful to you, you're welcome to it, and if it isn't, we've enjoyed the trip. Ramesh has a tremendous amount of experience in these matters, having done it in Miami-Dade and in Alachua, where he set up these programs, and now we have done it together with Heather and our efforts in Nassau and Clay. So we offer you a great deal of experience. And I offer you my own personal pledge and experience. I grew up in Frostproof and Lake Wales. I not only know where Sebring was, that was the big city to us. And my family grew up with the Sebring family. So we've been hanging around these parts for a while. We had a little packing house in Frostproof and a ranch over by Crooked Lake. So we know we know the ridge, and we'll be respectful. And we know your role as local officials, and we will always, always be respectful of that. So with that, let me turn it over to Ramesh, who will show you the nuts and bolts of what we do, and take what you need and leave the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Chairwoman Tuck and Commissioners. Good to see you all again. My name is Ramesh Butch, and I'm the Director of Conservation Acquisitions for the North Florida Land Trust, and it's a great pleasure to be here again in your wonderful county. As Allison mentioned, I have a long background in local government, so I have sat in this room presented to you sometimes on a long Tuesday night. And so, waiting for the land acquisition items to come up, we have to sit through a lot of the regulatory stuff, the quasi-judicial. So I feel deeply the connection you have to your community. And one of my personal touchstones is that the best government is that which is closest to the people, and you don't get any closer than local government. So this is where my heart is, and I'm so appreciative that Allison has given us the opportunity to sort of trot out the way we do business in land conservation for local governments and take it on the road and show other governments how it can be done. So happy to be here and happy to be working with you all. Again, the goals for today are, we're not here as advocates. We're not here to tell you that you haven't done a good job in land conservation or you have done a good job. We're here just to say, if you feel like you need to do more, and we can get into what that means, here is a way forward. And it's a way that is well trodden in Florida. There's 27 programs currently in existence. And as you can see from this slide, of the 84 referenda, this is local government referenda since 1999, 73 of those have passed. So you don't have to worry that you're on the bleeding edge of something. The other thing I will make note of is our most recent success is Clay County. It passed with over 73% of the vote. And that's a fairly conservative county, as you all know, and the fact that the people rose up and said, we'd like to do this also there, speaks well of this is not a partisan issue. This isn't a green environmental, blue state, whatever. This is a land conservation, means everything to everybody, and I'll get into that in a minute. The other thing I would point out in terms of the history of land conservation in the state, Governor DeSantis currently, Governor Martinez, Governor Bush, are the champions of land conservation when it comes to state level conservation. They put the most money into land conservation of any of the governors. So look out, those are Republican governors. So again, this isn't a R versus D. This is people really feel the values. And that's what we're going to talk about today is, what does that mean? What are the values that you or the community are feeling like are being lost? And is there a way other than sitting here on a Tuesday night and fighting with folks in green shirts about the right way to treat a piece of property? There's another way to do that. And so that's what we're hopefully here to show you today. As we go through the next hour or so, there'll be two consensus building questions that we'll ask you. And those will come up probably one in about 20 minutes and one in about 40 minutes. The first one will be whether or not you all feel like there's enough legs on this idea to move forward where we can go out to the community and get really broad support or broad not support for a local land conservation program. And if there is support on the board, those public meetings will really get at what the values are that people want to see protected. And those are on the boards in front of you, and we will go through for the public that are watching and in the room, and for you all, what those mean in terms of what's on the slides. What you see here on the slide is the blueprint that we hope to come back to you with in the fall. after we've gone through those public meetings, and it's really going to have two sections. The first section is how to run a land conservation program if that's what you want to do. It's going to have a model ordinance, and it's going to have a model tool to evaluate applications and how to run a program. The other part of the section will be if you want to get to that point, there's a blueprint to getting to a referendum. And we'll talk more about why referendums and how to pay for these kinds of programs. But let me lay the groundwork for that right now. I will be the first to admit, land conservation at the local level is not a core service. You have to decide how to fund ambulances, the sheriff, library, schools, sewers, and those kinds of core services. That's core service. Land conservation is not. And I think it's only fair to ask the public, if this is something you want us to do, we need to find a way to pay for this. And that's why we're not pushing referenda, but I think you need to find a funding mechanism for this. And I think it's fair to ask the public to come up and open their pockets and say, look, if you really want to do this, this is something we need to find a way to do that. Otherwise, you're competing with response times for ambulances and response times for the sheriff and sewer lines and school seats and those kinds of things. So again, you maybe hear me refer to a referendum, you may refer to a county program. Those are all decisions that you get to make as county commissioners, and you have to balance the needs and the funding for that. So hopefully we'll be able to walk you through some of those points today, and then go and check with the public this summer and this fall, and come back to you with a fully informed decision so that you can decide what you'd like to do. The second consensus building at the end will be, do you want us to move forward and actually do those public workshops? So the first consensus building is, do you think there's enough legs for us to do that? And the second is, here are your values. Let's explore those based on these boards and then see what your values are, because obviously you have the 100,000-foot picture of what Highlands County needs to provide. And you need to balance that against all those other services. And so to get to some consensus on what you all want to do, I think is really important. And how we weight that with the public input, subject matter experts, that's part of the art of this. So with that, I've used this word quite a bit, conservation values. And what do I mean by that? I think this graphic shows that there are a lot of benefits that come out of open space, or green space if you want. Buffers, storms and floods, natural habitat is the one that people obviously think about. Agriculture, very important in this community. I've become a true believer, a champion, prophet, or right word escapes me, but for agriculture. And this happened with a story that I don't come from farming, but I went out to Colorado to learn about ranching and why conservation easements are ranch lands. And we were visiting a rancher in Colorado. And after the day where we watched him run his cattle back and forth, I was sitting with him and I was sort of mulling over my head that this paragon of Western culture, this cowboy, had, with his neighbors, purchased a conservation easement on 1,000 acres near his ranch. And I guess I must have verbalized in my head, I never really thought about Western ranchers as environmentalists. He turned on me, boy. He said, son, do not call me an environmentalist. I'm a businessman. And if I can't run my cattle from the winter pasture in the mountains to the summer pasture, or the summer pasture in the mountains to the winter pasture in the valley, because that has become a subdivision, I'm out of business. Me purchasing an easement, that was a business decision. And I took that to heart, that first and foremost, when we're talking about agricultural property, it has to work for the producer. It has to work for the landowner, because it's for them, it's a business. It's probably their most valuable asset. So agriculture is on that diagram. Water supply is one of the big vote getters when it comes to referenda. Wildlife, everybody sort of understands. Providing recreational opportunities, and here we're talking about passive rec, so hiking, biking, bird watching, those kinds of recreation. It all goes to this sort of quality of life. The thing that I want to leave you with this slide, the mic drop moment, is none of these benefits are guaranteed unless you protect the property in perpetuity, that they all could disappear with a conversion of that land to something else. So that's why we do land conservation. In our conversations with you and with the subject matter experts, this number has come up, and it's published by the Florida Naturals Inventory that 33% of Highlands County is in conservation. That can be misleading, and I won't make apologies for FNA, but I think that number needs a little better explanation. When you think about that number, it's about 218,000 acres of land is in conservation according to FNA. When you think about that, 116,000 of that, so more than half of that, is federal. But of that federal total, 54,000 acres is Avon Park Air Force Range. It's not a conservation property. We had the same discussion in Clay County with Camp Landing, Joint Training Base Camp Landing. That property, if there's a national security reason, national defense reason, that property could become entirely national defense, and all the great work that Sheila and Buck do at Avon Park could become something else. And they will tell you that it's not to be considered conservation property. So if you remove that 54,000 from that number, the percentage of the county that's in conservation is actually 25%. The state average is about 32. So you've gone from being right there, done a great job, to now lower than the state average. And the last thing I will leave you with on this data is that of the remaining acreage, the 110,000 acres, or 164,000 acres, 122 of that is conservation easements. 72%, 74% is conservation easements, no public access. So again, I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. I think what you'll see as we go through this over the next hour is we're going to ask you, what are your values? And if one of your values is you would like to have more access to outdoors, 74% of the property that's in conservation has no public access. And maybe that's a deficit you'd like to address with a program that can do land conservation. So that's up there on that slide about providing recreational opportunities. So green printing, this is what we call kind of this process. The idea comes from a blueprint, which is the designs to build a building. We say there's a way forward to do land conservation. The way we would like to do it is we really rely on community input. And so we've already met with those people who have a deep connection to land. So you've got your ag producers, we've met with them, we've met with the NGOs, Audubon, Sierra Club, and so on, Archibald. We've met with folks whose responsibility is to regulate and to partner with local land conservation programs, so the water management districts, DEP, forestry. We've also met with what I would call the quality of life folks, the Chamber of Commerce, recreational providers, and so on. And we said, look, help us orient ourselves to Highlands County. What is there in Highlands County that's important and we should be talking to the commission about that would become things you'd want to save in a local program? And I'll get to some of those results in a minute, but that's the first part of community input. This is the second part, hearing from you all, which are the elected officials responsible for quality of life in the county for the most part. And the third thing, assuming that we get through today and you want us to go forward, is to go meet with a series of public meetings in the community and invite people in. We'll give them this same workshop, and then we'll also ask them, what are your community values? What would you like to see saved? What do you perceive as being lost in Highlands that a land conservation program might save? We take all that input, those benefits, and we sort of categorize them as conservation themes, conservation values. And you'll see on those boards, and Heather will explain this in more detail. So surface waters, drinking water, wildlife corridors, these are sort of broad themes that people then sort of get and then become the basis of language in a referendum. And I'll walk you through that exercise. So based on all of that input, we normalize it, prioritize it, rank it, and come back to you with sort of, here's what we think we're hearing as the top 3 things that people like to see saved. And you'll hear me preach this line of sight analogy. For those of you who are hunters or archers or target practice, you have your firearm, your bow and arrow, and you line up your sights so that you hit the target 10 out of 10 times. The analogy is there's several things you can consider to be iron sights if you're talking about a rifle. And these things allow you so that when at the end of the day you know what success is because you've bought land that exhibits the characteristics, the benefits that you would like to see protected, but also that the community expressed need to be protected. So you'll see this sort of line here. The first thing is community desire, what values are being lost. The referendum language has values in it that talk about those particular values, which drinking water, recreation. You have a tool that you use. It's a series of questions. When someone brings you a property, says, I'd like you to preserve this piece of property. Because remember, you're going to have a small bucket of money, a fair number of applications. You want to get the best ones. So you have a tool that evaluates those. How well does that property meet that referendum language? And then finally, you're going to have a portfolio of land. And if you've lined up these sites, you're going to have a portfolio that does exactly what your community wanted. And so that's why I talk about this line of sight, and you'll hear me refer to this quite often. So in terms of time frame, we are here in March. So as Dawn mentioned, we've been working since October. We've met with the subject matter experts over the last few months, and you'll see some of their results in a minute. But here we are in March. We're at a consensus building workshop, and at the end of what we call phase 1. Phase 2, assuming that, again, we get the consensus on Phase 1, is when we go out into public and do our public workshops. But I want to dwell a little bit on this feasibility study, the third part of this. If everything looks good, and we come back to you and we say, look, this is really good, you've got a lot of support here, and you all say, yes, it does look good, I think this is worthwhile, one of the things we encourage you to do is do this feasibility study. And what that is a deep dive. 300 to 500 members of the community will get a telephone poll and a series of questions. What comes out of that is their tolerance, not only to validate the values that we have generally come up with based on their feedback in a big meeting, but this is where there's just them and a pollster on the phone, so a little more intimate. It also comes back with their tolerance for how much they're willing to pay, which is really good information. So you're not out there, suggesting to do a $50 a household program when their tolerance was at a $15 level. So we'll get that information for you, and what we'll come back with you at the end of that feasibility study is, here's sort of the winning combination of things. These values, this dollar amount. And the source will be a source of funds that you all can tap into and that you haven't got allocated for another project. And so, at this point, if you've got someone here from the budget office that you need to hear from in terms of, well, really what sources are available to us, we don't want to go out testing in the polling sources that don't have really any legs because you've got it committed for sewers or sewer to conversion or roads or something else. We don't want to test those kinds of sources because it would just be a waste of everybody's time. We really want to test those sources that have legs. So at some point, if you need to hear from your budget office about what sources really could be possible and have you start thinking about that, and that gets to sort of the magnitude and how much you can afford, we can certainly have the staff bring you that presentation. So let's talk about the referendum. This is a sample referendum from Polk County, and the text that's in red, and remember that there's rules about referenda, it's 75 letters, words, and there's some limits on the summary and so on, and the nexus between the language, and there's lots of rules I won't pretend to understand, that's why we have lawyers. But the red parts are the parts that I think vary from program to program, and this is the part that we're testing for you all. So in this case, in Polk County, the things that rose to the top of the polling and in the public's eyes and for their commission was water resources, environmental lands, fish and wildlife habitats. And then the feasibility study I mentioned determined that a 20 mil ad valorem property tax was the way to pay for it. And they were going to issue bonds, so you have all the money sort of up front. And then they capped it at 75 million max, which gave some comfort. So again, you can imagine that feasibility study, there was a question that said, would you be more likely to vote for this if there was a cap on the total? How much would come off the tax rolls or how much would be spent? So that cap. And then the bond issue for 20 years. And so how long would they be paying this bond issue for? So that added to folks' comfort levels, and that's why we test that in the feasibility study. It's too much to do in terms of our community workshops to get into that level of detail. That's why this feasibility study, I think, is a really good part of it. And I would encourage you, if you want to go forward with this, that you take advantage of that. You can see there at the bottom some of the most recent land referendum successes. I mentioned Clay County at 73%. Lake County at 80%, Martin County at 64%, and Osceola County at 83%. So again, you're not doing this alone. So with that, I come to the first consensus question, which is, based on what you've heard so far, and if you have any questions, happy to answer them before you sort of come to consensus on this. But I'd like to ask whether or not there's any sufficient interest on the part of the board to work towards, and we're targeting November 2026. We suggest you do this at the biggest possible referendum or election that you can. So presidential years, typically the most popular. Second best would be those midterm election years. The next one for you would be 26. But that way we dispel any sort of criticism that you did this in the middle of the night on an off year and only those who cared about it or paid attention showed up. We want to get everybody. And as an ex-land conservation administrator, not having to deal with that soundbite every day of my professional life was really good. No, we did this on a general election. Everybody had a chance to say this. And I would encourage whoever, if you do pass this and you do have staff, one of the things that you all should remember, the staff should remember, is remember that, let's say it passes at 75%. 25% of the people you're taxing didn't vote for it, voted against it. and you're spending their money just as quickly as everybody else. And so there's that fiduciary responsibility that's especially tied to these programs because it's an additional dipping into their pockets, taking more money out. So it's something that I hold very closely, and I hope I can pass on every time I talk to you all about these kinds of programs. Before I ask the chair to come to consensus on this, just want to point out that the photographs you see here and those that will be the remainder part of the presentation were donated to us for our use by two of your local residents, Zach Franco and George McKenzie, and so we're grateful that they allowed us to use them. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions, and then at the time that the chair feels that she's ready to ask for consensus, I will go ahead and defer to her.
Any questions from the board? No? Any? Yeah. that's like
I was
we
just
did.
going to ask, when are you going to ask us? You said our preferences, or do you have a lot more to tell us? Or
I do.
I mean, I'm looking at these. I mean,
That'll be the next part,
okay.
Mr.
'Cause
Chair.
I don't feel like we've heard enough to be able to just go forward. If you have more presentation there.
I do have, and so what I was going to do is sort of, and I'm happy to move on with the identification of values, but usually what we do is we sort of say, before we get into all of this, do you feel like there's enough will to sort of hear that part of the presentation and let us go on to meeting with the public? If my sense is that there is, we're happy to move right into it.
I, for one, think it sounds good. I'd like to know more. I like the idea of working with this particular nonprofit company that's had a lot of successes and a lot of knowledge in this. I'm pleased with the successes that I've seen. You didn't indicate on the successes that were 73% or whatever, those 4 counties. You didn't indicate whether that was a midterm election or a national election. National election seems to have everybody and their mother coming out, 75, 80%, as opposed to much lower. And so if it meant waiting 2 years to get the biggest bang for the buck, but I think that based on the credibility of this particular agency and the desire to preserve some land, I'd like to know a lot more about it as one commissioner.
And appreciate that. And I don't have the numbers between general and midterm. My personal experience based on the programs I've worked in and helped, they've been general elections and they've passed, at the high level. And I don't know that midterm or high makes a lot of difference, but I can't swear to that.
Go ahead.
Just a quick comment. Certainly hearing what I've heard to this point, I mean, we're all elected up here to represent the people of Highlands County. We certainly want them to be involved in the process. We want them to be heard in a process. And for us to sit up here, for me to sit up here and say, no, I'm not interested in anybody having any input on this, I think that would be very lacking in me and representing the people of what I've sworn to do. So I certainly don't object to anything and an opportunity to share with folks on what a program would look like, how it's funded, what it does to property values, what it does for the future growth of this county and what have you, because, this isn't only going to come at a cost potentially on a referendum to self-impose a tax on yourself towards conservation, okay? It comes at a cost also to taxpayers when we have a reduction in revenue from lands that are put in conservation, okay? So they're paying for it 2 ways. They're paying for it through either a non-ad valorem or an ad valorem charge, 0.2 mils or whatever it was that another county did. And then, of course, if we buy up conservation land that was generating tax revenue, that is going to come off of the tax roll, okay? So that comes as a cost to the taxpayers also. So as long as we are presenting all this out there to the taxpayers and what have you and the voters of the county, then I certainly don't have any objection. I love green space, I love, open space and what have you, but there's a lot of things that I think have to be answered and a lot of interaction with the community that needs to happen, and this is all part of that process. And that's why I think this board approved this process to get to this point, to hear what the people of Highlands County want to see as far as conservation moving forward.
And I appreciate those comments, and I agree with you. And I'm glad you're having a discussion about impact to the tax base, because it is a reality. There's some offsets, property adjacent to conservation land can appreciate faster, but you're absolutely correct. Long-term, that property will never generate taxes unless it's an easement, and then it still stays on the tax rolls. But I'm glad you're having the conversation now. You're going into the eyes wide open, which is our purpose here today, is to have that full conversation so you make a fully informed decision. So I appreciate that.
Chris, you have anything?
And I kind of share Commissioner Kerouac's and Commissioner Roberts. There's not a whole lot of information, kind of make a decision without bringing it to the people and kind of get their feedback on would they be willing to impose a tax on themselves for this, if that's important enough to them. I did have, if we move forward with the studies or feasibility studies, would this be paid from the Conservation Trust Fund, or we're not going to be paying this out of general fund dollars?
Commissioner Campbell, I think that's for you all to decide. There are counties that had the ability to levy a referendum-based millage or tax, chose to do it out of general fund. There's not many places where enough money comes out of the general fund, given all the other priorities, that it makes a meaningful dent in terms of land conservation. Land is very expensive. So I think that's why the idea of this is not a core service, you need to identify a funding source for it. If the public wants it, they should be willing to put into their pockets extra and pull out some money to do that. So I agree with you. This should be, part of the conversation should be how to fund this. So yes, glad you're raising that question. But in terms of the source, I don't have that information because I think that's sort of getting really into the mechanics of your funding sources and what you have available to you. Like I said, you may have plans for a particular funding source and that's not available to you for something like this. Property taxes, you might be close to your millage cap. You don't want to hit that cushion, so there should be another source. And so the discussion of how to fund this will be part of the conversation going forward with staff. Certainly part of our next meeting with you all in the fall will be having identified the narrower range of sources, and then you can decide based on your capital improvement plan and so your comp planning what you have spoken for and really what's available to you. So unless we have information from the budget office today, I would say that that's something you'd probably want to sort of think about in terms of your all plans for the county budget over the next few years. What sources are available to you that you would use?
Yeah, one of certainly the challenges that we have up here as a commission is in inflationary times on how difficult it is to put a budget together. And we're a county of 1,100 square miles, but we have a very limited tax base. There's a lot of rural land in our county, undeveloped land in our county. And this commission just approved a budget that we're on now of $221 million. Our neighbor to the north in Polk County, their budget is over $3 billion. Okay, so they have a much larger tax base, and much more density, right? That's why they have the tax base that they have. So I think one of the challenges certainly moving forward is the funding challenge that will come along with this because we have such a limited tax base in this county. We're a very large county, landmass-wise, but as far as how many people help decorate the Christmas tree every year, that's a limited amount, and that's a limited amount in today's world in what we're exposed to and keeping this county operational on a daily basis. So those are the things I'm sure that we'll all explore and get feedback from the public and what have you. But that's something, and I'm sure some of these other counties may be of similar size to us or what have you, and had experienced some of the same challenges or what have you, but that is the piece that I'm going to be most interested in. And the funding mechanism of what it's going to do to future revenues, what it's going to do to land values and what have you. So I'm sure we'll explore a lot of that.
I think Commissioner Campbell was asking regarding the money for the study. So where would that come from? Not necessarily the going forward, the feasibility itself.
So that actually came to the board November 2024, and it did come out of Conservation Trust Fund. Our NRAC committee, Natural Resource Advisory Committee, did approve it to come to the board for permission, and it did go through.
And that would fund the study all the way through all the different phases that are being potentially proposed today.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay. And that's fine. This is it's so early in the process. I mean, you'd be kind of foolish to say no at this point. Like I said, and I'm in marketing and sales, so I understand a bunch of little yeses to get to the big yes. So, I mean, I get why we're being asked this question this early, is to kind of lock in a yes at this point just to go forward. So that's fine. Like I said, there's no harm in going forward, I think, from this point, and I think all the other commissioners we're all in agreement that at this particular spot, it's good to continue to move forward and see what's going on.
I'm the same way. I feel like I need to get out there and start asking some citizens, what do you think? What do you think? And then when I look at this page, referendum examples, and it says that Polk County, which we'd have to do the same thing, added a .20 mils ad valorem tax, and I think, well, we've already got a fire assessment, we got a garbage assessment, we've got ad valorem taxes, and even though it's a very small amount, we're adding another tax, and issuing bonds, and not only that, it goes for 20 years, and some of us probably won't even be here in 20 years, so we're voting for something that's not going to be us. So, but I kind of feel the same way. I want to get out there and ask people, what do you think about adding more taxes to your more money to your taxes with this? So.
I'd like to just add to that, Commissioner. I think it's all the way the sentences, the questions are framed. If you go to 100 people and you say, what do you think about adding more taxes? 100 people are going to say, heck no. I'm more coming from the standpoint that it was quite impressive that you attempted it 84 times and you passed it 73 times, and you're letting the people have an opportunity to give feedback, and it's not us, a group of 5, but it's a referendum where people can go to the polls and say, do I want to impose a small tax on myself to get these benefits? Until you hear everything and see how it's written and see how the referendum will be. But I would be real nervous about myself going out and asking people about it because I don't have enough knowledge about the law, and all I know as soon as they hear the word tax, they could tell me to sit down. So,
Commissioners, if I could answer just a little bit at the big picture side. You'll have a hard time getting somebody in front of you who is more fiscally conservative than I. I was vice chairman of the Republican Party of Florida at one point in my life, and I was Governor Martinez's running mate when he ran for re-election in 1990. So I have a pretty strong record of being pretty conservative. And Clay County is the most conservative, significant county in the state, and it went 75%. Because as this thing, and I'm hearing that you'd like to see some more, and I think among the things you'll see is how the pieces can fit together in a fiscally responsible way, where, for one thing, by having the county involved, you can leverage your money into tapping into federal and state money. Maybe. Things are in flux, but we'll see how they flow. And private money as well. 2, it's not an either-or. Conservation can leverage the value of the land around it for development. Babcock Ranch, Farmington, there are some examples that are very powerful in this. So I think you are wise to allow it to go forward, and with your consent, we will, and we'll see how it plays out. But we're not a bunch of hippies coming in here to show you what to do with your land. I promise. Thank you.
So it does sound like we have consensus for us to move forward, and I wanted to give you that exit ramp before we, kicked off phase 2, so appreciate that. At this time, what I had built in some time was if you all needed a break, but if you would like to move right on, we can move right into it. All right. as I mentioned earlier, I want to talk a lot about conservation values, and this is what the posters are in front of you and what you'll see on the slides and that the folks in the room will get to see. And so, again, just thanks to a couple of the photographers for loaning us some of these pictures. Subject matter experts. So one of the things we do when we go into a community is we say, look, some places we don't know a lot about, and we don't know sort of what's important to the folks down there. And so we reach out through the community, who are the people that sort of are deeply invested in land in that county. And so again, I've grouped them as agricultural experts, recreation economic experts, culture and historic resources, nonprofits, and resource agencies. We had sort of meetings, focused meetings with those folks, and we asked them some questions that allowed us to sort of put together these maps for you. And what's up here are, essentially water issues, habitat issues in green, ag and rural lifestyle issues in yellow, and red. And you don't have to worry about reading all of those. I'll give you all of this information and all the questions and all the polling in an interim report, which you'll get in a couple of weeks, that then you can sit with as we go out in the community. But I did want to share with you a couple of the more interesting responses that we got. What you're seeing here are the questions that we asked, and the three of the tallest bars are those where the folks voted on that answer as number one, the most important for Highlands County in their opinion. And so surface water quality, over 60% of the respondents said that was their number one issue. Preserving the most vulnerable habitats was third. But interesting to me, folks that said, and this was whether they were NGOs or agencies or the ag community, said preserving existing farms and ranch lands that were vulnerable to conversion should be a priority for Highlands County in any new program that they build. So I thought that was very, very interesting for me. And again, it's sort of go back to that lesson in Colorado. Why was I surprised? But they were pretty strong on that news. You could see 60%. And again, you'll get all of the answers and all of the comments that folks had, but I would share with you a couple of the interesting comments that they were able to give some specific comments. And so a comment in response to question one about the most significant water issues. Water issues should be funded by a broader area, not our county, because the water management district is using our county for recharge of other cities. So folks thinking that as far as protecting water resources, that's really a water management district function, not for the county. At least this one person thought that. Also in that same section, a person responded, the public should be allowed to use the land we pay for. So that goes to that comment I made earlier about providing access to some of these areas. Water recharge should be paid for by others. Water quality should be our local expense, secure our local impacts. So a couple of opposition points of view there. A question under the lifestyles, the working lands and rural lifestyles. Pay for the cheapest land first. Forget the ag lands near downtown. Those should be developed. And that was after a conversation we'd had. I said, the most vulnerable stuff typically is the stuff closest to the development front. That's going to be the more expensive land. You're going to get less bang for the buck if you buy that kind of property. That didn't seem to sway anybody. They said, protect the most vulnerable. But there was at least one comment. They said, look, give up on those. We need places for people to live. That makes the best sense in terms of providing services to people. The closer they are to the center of services, downtown government, whatever it is, schools, the cheaper it is to provide those services. So you're not doing bus miles and those kinds of things. Consider working lands that are important for wildlife corridors, and then an emphasis on passive rec for the county. So those are some of the comments that jumped out at me based on the feedback we got. So with that, I think I would like to turn this over to my colleague, Heather Nagy. Heather has a lot of experience doing conservation planning. She's our conservation planner. She's responsible for all the good maps that you're seeing and on the slides in front of you. And I would like to turn it over to her to walk you through these conservation themes, and then have you embark on that second consensus building exercise, which is, what are your conservation values? So,
Sir, one quick before you move on.
Yes,
For
sir.
the subject matter expert panel, can you tell me how many people were on there?
I don't have that number ahead. There was probably over 40, almost 50 people, I think, was the total number.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one of the biggest panel, I think, was our ag experts panel, followed by the NGO community. So, yeah, I can get you those. You'll get a report with all of those details in it. And if you want, I can put the names in there of everybody, but I shouldn't think that's a problem.
I was just curious on the number. Thank you.
Yeah. Heather?
Great. Thank you, Ramesh. And thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners, for having me here today and having the Land Trust. So as Ramesh said, in my role as Strategic Initiatives Manager at the Land Trust, most of my work focuses on working with our partners, like Highlands County, and helping us to work together to achieve our mutual conservation goals. And I have worked previously on the Clay County program as well as the Nassau County program that we worked on, doing some of the mapping and data analysis for those counties. And another large part of my position is our GIS, managing our data analysis as well as our mapping. And so that's really what I'm here to talk to you all about today is these posters, which people will be able to come up and see later on today. But as Ramesh had mentioned earlier in the presentation, when we're looking at this line of sight, we want to ensure that the types of lands that this program, if that's where we end up moving to, ends up protecting are the ones that were originally desired by the public. And we can do this by determining the conservation values that can be protected through a land conservation program. And so we've prepared this series of maps that illustrate the conservation values that we think people would think of in Highlands County when thinking about a land conservation program. And so these were based off of feedback from those subject matter expert meetings, as well as what values are typically represented in some of those other land conservation programs around the state, and then what the science and data showed us as well of what values were present here in the county. And so I'm going to give you a little bit more detail about each of these maps and the different values they represent. And then later you'll have some time, we'll have some maps to print out where you'll be able to share what values you think should be represented in a potential program. And so as we go through these maps, you'll see that each of them have some shared colors that will remain the same. So these lighter green areas represent conservation and public lands. So those will be on all of the maps, as well as the gray areas, which represent urban areas. So all of the white areas outside of those represent our opportunity areas, and those are the lands that would be available for potential conservation. And as mentioned previously, these benefits that open space and land can provide are not guaranteed unless we protect lands within these opportunity areas. And so this first map that I'm going to talk about, and the first conservation value, is something that people would likely typically think about when they think of a land conservation program, and that is protecting threatened and endangered species and habitats. And by protecting these threatened and endangered species and habitats, it'll be very important to help us protect native fish, wildlife, and plants that are found here in Florida and prevent them from going extinct. And so this map shows some of the threatened species that are found within Highlands County, including the Florida scrub jay, the Florida panther, and Florida black bear. These are all sighting locations for those species. And this also shows rare habitats that are found within the county. So these are habitats that have been identified by the state of Florida as important for conservation. These are types of habitats that are not well represented through existing conservation lands, and so they are a high priority for future conservation. And so the next value that we think might be important to Highlands County residents is protecting surface water features. And this is really critical for both flood protection, water quality, and recreation as well. And so this map shows where the surface water features are found in Clay County, including wetlands, rivers, streams, and creeks. And you'll see there's some stars on some of the lakes that are found in the county, and these represent TMDLs and MFLs. And so TMDLs are the total maximum daily loads, and this is a calculation that limits how much pollution can enter a body of water, and these are calculated for lakes that have not met water quality standards. And the MFL lakes is minimum flows and levels, and these are lakes that have a limit on how much water can be withdrawn from them, and these are established for priority water bodies. And then finally, this map also shows where the high-risk FEMA flood zones are found in the county, and these are going to be areas that are at high risk for flooding that are found within the 100-year floodplain. And so the next value that we have represented is drinking water. And this is a little different from the surface water that we just looked at because this is more related to water quantity. So conservation lands can be very important in protecting drinking water by helping to replenish our groundwater supply to make sure that we have a good supply of drinking water both now and into the future. And so this map shows some of the dots that are on there represent public water supply wells. So these are wells that provide at least 15 service connections or 25 residents. So these are things that would service like a community, a church, a public building. There's also private wells on there as well. These are known private well locations. And then there's also public water supply tanks, which hold drinking water prior to distribution. And then the darker layer, the darker blue that's found throughout, those are the aquifer recharge layers. And these are areas of the county that have high potential for recharging aquifers or natural systems and the water supply. And so these areas are the highest potential recharge areas, and so these would be really high priority for protecting drinking water. And so this next map displays wildlife and conservation corridors. And there's a lot of colors, a lot kind of going on this map, but where all of these colors overlap represents important connection areas between existing conservation lands. And by connecting these lands together, we can build large contiguous natural areas, which are really important for wildlife, for plants, and for people as well. And these connected corridors allow wildlife to move more freely, to access food and water, shelter, breeding habitats, and they also support people and communities by helping to support human health and quality of life, like clean air and water, but then also recreation areas as well. And so this map shows the Florida Wildlife Corridor, and this is a statewide network of 18 million acres of connected lands and waters that are critical to the survival of many of Florida's imperiled species. And over 8 million acres of the corridor are not yet protected, and so these are really high priority areas for conservation. The hatched color represents the Florida Panther least cost corridors, and these are the potential pathways and corridors that a panther is most likely to use. And then finally, the yellow area represents the Avon Park Air Force Range Sentinel Landscape. And a Sentinel Landscape is an area where conservation lands, working lands, and lands that are important for military defense all converge. And so these lands that are within a Sentinel landscape boundary are a very high priority for conservation. And by conserving areas within these existing corridors and conservation areas, Highlands County can leverage partnerships and existing funding to help protect high priority lands and create these connected corridors throughout the county. And so another conservation value that residents may be interested in protecting is agricultural lands. And so this map has a lot of different colors that all represent different types of agriculture, like farms, ranches, or tree plantations. And this really shows that there is a lot of significant agricultural land within Highlands County that is worthy of protecting. And by conserving these working landscapes, we can help to ensure that they will not be converted to non-agricultural uses. And we can also help to ensure that farmers and ranchers can maintain that way of life and help to pass it on to the next generation. Because in addition to providing food for our tables, timber for houses, farms and forests also help absorbing rainwater, which can prevent floods and alleviate droughts, and it also provides habitat for wildlife. And so the agricultural areas on this map have been determined by the Florida Cooperative Land Cover Map, and this is a statewide land cover layer that is created from existing sources and an expert review of aerial photography. And the farmland of unique importance, the yellow areas, these are areas that are identified by the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. And these are unique farmland areas that are used for the production of specific high-value food and fiber crops, such as citrus, tree nuts, olives, cranberries, and other fruits and vegetables. And the next conservation value that this is something that a lot of counties are now incorporating into local land conservation programs, and that is access to recreation. Parks and open spaces enable residents to experience nature, engage in exercise, and just enjoy leisure time in the natural environment. And parks can also provide positive economic benefits as well, including enhancing property values for properties that are nearby conservation areas. And it can also help to spur local economies and also attract new residents and businesses to a county. And so this map shows in lighter green and darker green the areas that are accessible and not accessible for public recreation. The inaccessible areas are lands that are not available for public recreation. And so these would include Avon Park Air Force Range, mitigation banks, or conservation easements. And so this really kind of helps to show, highlight that there actually is not a lot of publicly accessible recreation areas within Highlands County right now. But this also does show where there are some locations of some boat ramps, beach access locations, as well as some existing trails like hiking, biking, or equestrian or paddle trails within the county. And then the last conservation value that we are going to look at is protecting historic and cultural resources. Highlands County has a rich rural and agricultural history, and so protecting some of these historic areas and artifacts can help promote and protect the history of the county. And there are some local land conservation programs that are now including historic and cultural resources as a conservation value. It helps to provide a source of funding to protect some of these resources. They tend to be underfunded and perhaps only protected by as a fringe benefit of protecting another type of resource. And so this map shows some of the historic districts that are found within Highlands County, and these are recorded by the State Historic Preservation Office. So these may be historic railroad corridors, military areas, agricultural lands. It also shows historic structures, so things like home sites, churches, military buildings, hotels, etc. These have been also identified by the State Historic Preservation Office as historic from surveys, historical records, or other types of sources. And so these really highlight that Highlands County has been and continues to be a really great place to live and to work. And so, happy to answer any questions, but at this point we would like to invite you all to share what values you would like to see potentially represented in a land conservation program. And we do this through what's called dot matrix style voting. So Ramesh is handing out packets that are each of these maps that you just saw, as well as 5 dot stickers. And you can just add those to the map for any values that you would like to see represented. So in that referendum language, they would be the types of values that would be represented in that referendum language. You can place, if you feel really passionate about one conservation value, you can put all your dots on that one, maybe spread them out. You don't have to use all the dots if you don't want to. But kind of gives us an idea of what you all would like to see represented in a potential program. So happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, if not, you can feel free to put stickers on your maps.
An example, I would ask that if you find one area that you like, what are you saying, put the red dots on different areas in there?
It doesn't matter where on that, just on the general map.
Just on.
Yeah, so if there's one, you're really passionate about agriculture, you can put all your dots on that map. Maybe you like 3 of them, you can spread them out across those different maps.
Okay. Gotcha. I gotcha.
Yes, so if you really like one, that you really want to see that one, put all 5 on that one. Maybe you like 2 or 3, you can spread them across, but you don't have to use them all. It's kind of up to you how you all would like to do it.
Encourage you all to use all your dots.
Yeah, we'll tabulate them up after.
And then when you're done, you can just pass them down to the clerk and we'll add them up and let you know what the answer was.
Savannah is the keeper of the dots. I think that's
Well,
it.
Thank you all, everybody, for engaging in that exercise. Heather, if you wouldn't mind doing the math for us so we can give the folks the results. Just to wrap up then, what we hope to accomplish today with you all was sort of outline for you what a land conservation program can do, kind of like the history of land conservation in the state, and that you're not sort of taking a leap of faith all by yourselves. This is well-trod path. We do know that every county is different, and the questions that have been raised during my presentation, I think, speak well of the way you're going to conduct yourselves going forward. It does require commitment. It does require funding. It is going to have an impact. And so I appreciate the conversation, and we're happy to help inform any of you or the board generally as a group on any of those questions if you'd like to hear from our experience. We can also draw from, there's a number of people in your area, Tampa, Hillsborough, Polk, that have these kinds of programs. And if you'd like to hear more from them about what's it like to run a program, any difficulties, I'm sure the staff and we can sort of invite folks down to pass that on. I've done that over the years in my position with the Warren Red District and with the Alachua County Miami-Dade, where we were invited to talk about how we run our programs and lessons learned and so on. So again, happy to do all of that. What we'll do from here going forward is, as I mentioned earlier, and you all have indicated you want us to do, is to go hear from the public and bring you back those results. And so the plan is we're going to do at least 3. Right now the plan is for 3 public workshops. Will be publicly noticed. Folks will have plenty of notice to get out to a location. It will be held in the evening, after work, that they can show up. They will get almost exactly the same presentation. They won't get the first consensus building question, obviously. We'll go right through here's what a local program can do, here's what it means. We'll talk about the impacts financially, that there is an impact to the tax base, there is an impact in terms of running it, and land management afterwards. And those are all the costs. The benefits are the ones you saw earlier that you might get out of it. But we want them to also, as you are, to consider the full story, be fully informed. We'll put all that information together in a report. We'll weight the results, and I will fill out the rest of that manual for example ordinance, like I said, example referendum language, what that referendum language might look like absent the financial information, but just the values based on what the feedback we've gotten. What you will do at that point is you'll have a manual that says, okay, we heard from you all, we've heard from the subject matter experts, we've heard from the public. In Clay, it was interesting, we had 3 of the 4 items, or we had 7 topics. 2 of the 3 were exactly the same. The third one was different for the public versus the board. The board was interested in recreation. The public, I think, was interested more in water quality. We ended up with 4 things on the ballot because I thought those 2 were important, and what the board brought was sort of their responsibility to provide this amenity that maybe the public didn't perceive, but it passed like 73%. So we don't like referenda to be confusing, and so we limit the sort of values in that language to not more than 4. 3 is perfect. So those are the kinds of things we're working on. That's why we go through this exercise, try to really nail down, which is why I apologize, we only gave you 5 dots and 7 maps. We really wanted you to pick the ones that you wanted. Thank you, Heather.
Excuse me, sir, while you look through those, can I just suggest if you're going to do 3 public workshops, do 1 in the town of Lake Placid, 1 Sebring, 1 Avon Park? You may have already decided that, but thank you.
It's good to have that validated. I appreciate that. And we did hear that maybe you'd like to have one. I understand there is a significant seasonal population here. Obviously, come November, most of those people are going to be here and they're going to be voting or being asked to vote on it. So we want to make sure we capture those values also. We were going to put them all off until the fall in terms of our 3 meetings. We were encouraged to consider doing 1 in a couple of weeks while folks are still here in the spring, build on the momentum that you all are going to build today, and then maybe do a couple in the fall. So we're going to work towards that. With that, drum roll. So you had 5 commissioners, 5 dots each. That's 25 dots. For surface water, we had 3 votes. For drinking water, we had 7 votes. For threatened endangered species, we had 1 vote. Preserving ag lands and rural lifestyles, we had 4 votes. For providing access to recreation, we had 7 votes. Cultural and historic resources, we had 1 vote. And wildlife corridors, we had 2 votes. So I think the 3 then highest vote getters were drinking water sources, recreation, providing access to recreation, and then behind was preserving ag land as the number 3. So again, I think that speaks well of sort of your role as the county commission, thinking about all the amenities that you have to provide your population, your community. So again, we will formally present all this back to the staff as a report, a draft report, and they will provide to you as an interim report for this project. So with that, I know it's all between you and your dinner, so I'm happy to yield to any questions and turn it back over to the chair.
A real quick question. I really like these maps down here. On the handout, the ledger is so small that I would like to find a way to maybe get one a certain size that I can have that like in a book or binder, and then when I go to that page, I can actually
Zoom in.
read, because I can't read it.
Yep.
So I don't have the same level of appreciation I would have if I could read it. So
We'll be happy to provide that to you. We'll make sure the staff gets that for you.
that was a pretty fast what you just did, counting all those dots in such a short period of time, and came up the top 3, and that was pretty amazing. You did that in about 15 minutes.
Well, you guys are way more efficient than Clay County was. I shouldn't have said that. Sorry, Clay County. Yeah. You guys are right on it, so I appreciate that. And then we will leave these here for the members of the public that didn't get a chance to see them, because it passes by quickly, put it on the slide. And we're happy to stand here for a few more minutes and answer any questions that the public might have, sort of one-on-one. But we'll leave them here. We do need to take them on the road with us, so we can't leave the posters here. But we will send to Dawn and to Sam files that they can print out and leave for you in a bigger binder.
Yeah. Couple of questions and comments. As far as the public workshops, it would be important to me that certainly permanent residents of Highlands County make up a vast majority of those workshops, okay? I know we have a big seasonal influx here, I understand that, but I think we need to be cautious on how much of that input and how we're going to measure that, because they could possibly have an opinion on that, or vote on that. At the end of the day, if they don't vote here, if they're not paying taxes here, I really think that they need to have a limited amount of involvement in this process. Not that we don't value them, because we do. They had a big part of our economy, want them to continue to visit here and help bring their dollars here. But, when we get down to the nuts and bolts of this thing, the people that are going to be potentially exposed to this for the next 20 years or what have you, as a commissioner, would be the most important things to me to hear, to measure what their responses and what their wishes are moving forward when it comes to this. A couple other things is that, one of my priorities during my service as commissioner has been stormwater and stormwater runoff. And certainly, when we turn on the news during the rainy season, during tropical storms and hurricanes, we see a lot of that, where we have communities that have been on very aggressive development paths and can cause issues when it comes to stormwater runoff. We're doing 3 basin management studies right now to identify some problem areas in the county. So as development happens, pervious ground turns into impervious ground, and that water has to run off somewhere. Okay, so I think it's critical that we maintain a balance, that we have proper stormwater areas and retention areas and things like that. And wetlands can also offer ways to clean that water before it passes through different wetlands. So, as far as conserving wetlands and properties that may be on an overlay map or something that typically is not going to be developed, it's identified as a wetland, getting permitting to do it or to excavate it or dredge it and fill it back in probably is not going to happen. So I certainly think those are properties that we need to pay attention to. Another thing that's in somewhat of the planning stages is an acronym called LOCAR, Lake Okeechobee Component A Reservoir, okay? and attended a meeting, probably now goes back over a year ago or what have you, that the Water Management District and the Army Corps of Engineers is looking at roughly, they were talking roughly approximately 14,000 acre above ground water impoundment in the southeast quadrant of Highlands County. Okay? And the whole idea was to capture water coming off the Kissimmee River during the heavy rainfall time of year, holding that water in the reservoir instead of letting it go straight into Lake Okeechobee. Lake Okeechobee gets to a certain level, then we have to start releasing water east and west, which we know the complications that has caused in the estuaries and in coastal communities when it comes to blue-green algae and things like that. So the more that we can preserve Lake Okeechobee at a constant level year-round is better for the ecology of the lake. And then if we have the capacity to store water during times of heavy rainfall, then it can slowly be released back as it is needed in the system. So I know that is something that is in the works. Of course, there's a lot that's changed with federal funding and things like that moving forward, so I don't know how projects like that are going to be affected. But I know one thing that was communicated during some of those meetings was that it was important that if something like that was going to be developed in the county, that there was a recreational component to that also, okay? This is land way out in the middle of nowhere. This is in the southeast, a very rural area, a lot of open pasture land, ranch land space, what have you, that potentially could be a location for this reservoir. So that is something that is potentially coming our way in the county that could consume as much as 14,000 acres of property. So I think that we need to certainly be looking at that as we're doing these discussions and what have you, because, if that comes, I think we would maybe have very little input on whether that potentially is going to happen or not. If it's a federal project or what have you, it may be something that is not going to be decided pretty much at this level, but on a state and federal level. So that is something I just wanted to note of, that we need to certainly see where that project is at. Is it going to come to fruition? Is it stalled and, does it look like it's going to come to fruition? But I think it's something that we certainly need to pay attention to.
Good point.
Anybody else? Any other comments or?
Yeah, is anybody in the public want to say some things?
It's up to you.
It's coming up.
Okay.
Agenda.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Are you?
Madam Chair, we are done. We appreciate the opportunity again. We
Okay.
look forward to working with you
Sure.
going forward.
Did you say yes or no on the
Agenda.
people? No. Okay, does anybody in the audience have anything? Does anybody want to talk? Okay, John, and then the gentleman back there, and the gentleman back there. Thank you.
I'm doing it. Low budget.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For the record, my name is John Talent. I live in the garden spot of the world, Lake Placid, Florida. Commissioners, any proposal for Highlands County to purchase and preserve conservation lands should include an in-depth analysis of how much of the county currently is or is planned to be set aside for that purpose, and, more importantly, the economic impact of that set-aside. In over 50 years of dealing with environmental set-aside appraisals, proposals, I've been asking how much is enough. With the detailed and well-funded plans set out in the Florida Wildlife Corridor, Preservation 2000, Florida Forever, the Florida Rural and Family Lands Protection Program, and various other programs, it appears we're getting very close to an answer to that question. Preservation through government purchase and management sounds like motherhood and apple pie until you drill down into the data. Highlands County consists of about 651,328 land acres, not including lakes and water bodies. Currently, about 103,121 of those acres are under federal, state, or county government ownership and is either under or may be suited for conservation management. An additional 19,958 acres are owned by the Nature Conservancy and Archbold Biological Station. That includes the Buck Island Ranch. These are 501c3s dedicated to conservation and exempt from taxation. We also have 104,152 acres of the county under various conservation easements with varying levels of tax exemption under Florida Statute 196.26, parens 2 and parens 3. Referring to the attachment to the handout, Attachment 1, the Conservation Land Summary, we currently have then a total of 227,231 acres in conservation lands or lands already under government ownership that may be appropriate for conservation. That's 34.9% of our county. With the total cost in foregone ad valorem tax revenue currently of about $1.7 million at our current 8.1 mills. As best I can tell, the data is combined in many cases with other counties, but as best I can tell, there are about 67,000 more acres. I'll beg your indulgence on the time limit.
I'll give you another minute or so if you just kind of wrap it up,
It'll take me
okay?
a few more than that. Please bear with me. I think it's valid information. It's not just opinion. About 67,000 more acres planned for acquisition either in fee or by easement. So that takes us to about 45% of the land in the county and roughly $2 million in lost revenue to the county, and that doesn't include school millage. It appears that Florida Statute 259.032, paren 10, provides for payment in lieu of taxes to offset some of this on land acquired by the state. Unfortunately, it appears currently that that payment is virtually negligible. On that basis, I think we'd be smart to balance the Florida Wildlife Corridor plan with an economically viable Florida Human Life Corridor plan to ensure that we don't become the next endangered species. I don't think we want Sebring to ever be like Orlando. I know I don't. But I don't think we want it to be like Moorhaven either. Keep in mind that purchasing the land is the cheapest part of the deal. Effective management is a significant cost in perpetuity. In spite of the assertion made earlier, the Avon Park bombing range is a great example of cost-effective management. They have a staff of 20 to 30 people to manage the full 106,000 acres of the range as it lies in Polk and Highlands County. They balance conservation with economic activities such as cattle leases, timber operations, and hunting permits, in addition to blowing things up.
Are you about ready to wrap it up, John?
Be about 4 more minutes, please.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. They balance conservation with their economic activity, but their job is made much easier by virtue of the fact the property is totally contiguous and isn't riddled with out parcels. At the other end of that challenging spectrum, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission is currently responsible for about 1,500 acres of trustees-owned lands in the Leisure Lake subdivision, about 40% of it. It's a management nightmare of interspersed out parcels, many with occupied structures. It's a miniature Los Angeles wildfire waiting to happen. The situation is replicated in many of the older Highlands County subdivisions as well. So it becomes one of the questions is how much money is the county willing to devote to conservation lands management, and what are the liabilities of it? Speaking of money, Highlands County is in the throes of a slow motion revenue train wreck due to the disappearing citrus industry and various actions by our legislature. Grove acreage in the county has declined from about 78,000 to about 41,000 since the year 2000, a 52% decrease in a high-value ad valorem tax generator. That loss of tax revenue currently runs about $1 million a year and will increase as that decline continues. We would do well to consider the long-term impact of this loss when contemplating potentially taking more land off the tax roll for preservation and going into debt to do it. If that's not enough of a problem, the legislature has capped our assessed value increases at not more than 3% a year without regard to inflation. They also just passed legislation indexing the second $25,000 homestead exemption to inflation. That's great for me as a homeowner, but the long-term impact is negative for all of us.
John, we need to move on. We've got a couple more people here that want to speak.
Okay.
I appreciate it. And is everything in here in your letter?
It's in writing.
Okay.
Everything
Okay.
is there.
Thank you so much for all your hard work, and we appreciate you coming up here.
Well, I hope it's of some value.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Dale Gillis. I am Vice President of Highlands County Audubon Society. So I'm here to read a statement from Highlands Audubon. First, I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and provide comments on the Ridge to River initiative that you are discussing. The Ridge to River program is an important initiative that will bring lasting positive effects to land conservation throughout Highlands County. It should become an important tool in the county's toolbox and allow the county the ability to protect lands within the Lake Wales Ridge and the county that has significant habitat and/or natural importance. Regarding the Lake Wales Ridge, as noted by the Florida Wildlife Corridor Foundation, the Lake Wales Ridge is older and richer in number of endemic plants and animals associated with its characteristic dry upland climates. These uplands provide habitat for at least 21 federally listed plant species, many of which are found nowhere else on Earth, as well as the federally listed Florida scrub jay and the state's only endemic mammal, the Florida mouse. It further notes that over 85% of upland plant communities on the Lake Wales Ridge have been lost to some human land use. We, the citizens of Highlands County and the Board of County Commissioners, have a significant responsibility to help conserve the unique, rare, and extremely fragile plants, animals, and their habitats in or around the Lake Wales Ridge and the rest of Highlands County. The Ridge to River program can assist in meeting that responsibility. Do we need more conservation land in Highlands County? The answer is yes, especially if those lands are brought into conservation or done so through a process that is, as defined by the North Florida Land Trust, an adaptable, collaborative, strategic approach that reveals the range of benefits nature provides a community and suggests the ways that community can protect and enhance those benefits. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. The gentleman back there in the light blue shirt.
I filled out my little form. I'll give it to you. Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Paul Gray. I work for Audubon, Florida. I'm a staff scientist at our Everglades program. My office and my home are in Highlands County, so I'm also a resident. we're a conservation organization, so obviously this is something that we look favorably upon. And as you've heard, these referendums are immensely popular among citizens. People like green spaces and blue spaces, and I live right near Istapoga Park since my office is in Loretta, and I pull in there just to see who's there, and there's always someone there. I mean, people really are happy for this, and so this is something that we can do. You know, Ken Burns said the national parks are America's greatest idea, and so this would give us an opportunity for the county to get the kinds of things that its citizens want. And Martin County just passed a new referendum because their old one expired. And what they got from the old one was they actually got a 6-to-1 match. They used the money for matching money for different types of projects with state and federal and whoever would partner with them. They got to return a 6-to-1 on their dollars on this. So this is an opportunity for you guys to have matching money to say to other people, hey, we'll pitch in if you'll pitch in, and we can get more done than any of us individually would. So anyway, we really strongly support this. We appreciate you guys letting this move forward, hearing from the citizens and seeing if we can get something that everybody likes and supports. And by the way, I'm one of the experts who wanted to preserve working lands. It doesn't all have to be pristine conservation area. It can be farms and ranches and those types of things, which we can put easements on, and we can keep the agricultural industry around here. I think that's very important for the future of our community. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. The lady in the white shirt.
Hi, good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Kristen Nowak, representing the Florida Wildlife Corridor. Our conservation team would just like to express our support for this planning study workshop and exploring conservation opportunities in this county. My dad's also here. He's a resident of Highlands County on Lake Josephine. As Heather mentioned, the Florida Wildlife Corridor is a network of 18 million acres of connected wild and working lands ranging from the Everglades to the Georgia and Alabama borders. 10 million of the acres of the corridor are already preserved and in conservation, and 8 million acres are opportunity areas in need of protection to ensure that the corridor can exist for wildlife to roam and for people to have clean water, resources, and recreational opportunities. Within Highlands County, there's a large portion of wildlife corridor as identified in the 2021 Wildlife Corridor Act. Of those acres, 265,000 of those corridor acres are not currently protected in the county. So a countywide conservation program is the perfect opportunity to protect these areas, which connect already conserved gems like the Fish-Eating Creek headwaters in the south portion of the county to Avon Park Air Force Range and Kissimmee Prairie Preserves on the northern sides of the county. So linking all those already protected lands so they're not isolated islands. A program is needed to take action to protect lands with willing sellers and conservation easements. The county's showing great leadership by exploring a program like this. So we're just here to say the Corridor Foundation strongly supports these conservation initiatives being discussed today. We thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Gentleman, right here, behind Mr. Duval. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Hannah Bowen, and I'm speaking today as both a resident of Highlands County and also a representative of Conservation Florida. We are an organization committed to protecting the 18 million acres of the Florida Wildlife Corridor, as many has already mentioned. I'd like to express my strong support for the Ridge to River Conservation Planning Study. Preserving agriculture in Highlands County means protecting our way of life, our economy, and our natural resources. As someone who works directly with landowners in Highlands County, I'll share that farmers and ranchers in this county want to keep their land in agriculture, but they're facing the increasing pressure to sell or develop. We all know about the decline of the citrus industry that has put working lands at risk, and without action, we could lose the open spaces, the water resources, and the rural traditions that make Highlands County special. Many landowners are already seeking conservation easements to protect their land, but the demand far outweighs what funding partners in this area can support. So without additional funding like that of the local program that's being recommended today, we risk losing lands that sustain our agriculture culture and economy and lose the opportunity to secure a connected Florida wildlife corridor. As mentioned, there are so many premier conservation groups working in Highlands County, but that doesn't mean we don't need a county-led program. A dedicated land conservation program would help provide funding to help landowners protect their agricultural lands while keeping them productive. Ensure decisions are made locally with a focus on the specific needs of Highlands County farmers, ranchers, and residents, and also amplify existing conservation efforts and partnerships to maximize impact without duplicating efforts. So this study is not a commitment to buying land, rather it's a necessary step toward an understanding how to protect Highlands County's agricultural lands and natural resources. It'll help the county determine which lands are most critical to agriculture, water, and wildlife, which funding sources are available to support land conservation, and how to create a program that meets the needs of landowners in the community. There's no Florida Wildlife Corridor without working lands. This study will provide a path forward to ensure Highlands County remains a place where agriculture thrives, landowners have conservation options, and our natural landscapes are protected for future generations. So thank you so much. I urge the commissioners here to support the Ridge to River Conservation Planning Study as a way to secure the future of Highlands County's agricultural heritage. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, who else? Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Corey Snyder. I'm a resident of Lake Placid. Thank you very much for your time today. I am not from Florida. I moved here a few years ago, but I grew up on a farm, and I grew up in a very small agricultural community, and Highlands County has very quickly become a place that feels like home to me because of the agricultural nature of the county. I think that Highlands County is at a crossroads right now. Just north of us in Polk County, Lakeland is one of the fastest growing metro areas in the entire country. And as space runs out up north, I fear that they're going to head south. If nothing is done to protect agricultural and working lands and the natural green space that is here found on the Lake Wales Ridge, which some people spoke about earlier, is a really, really important ecological habitat and community. I think that support for a countywide conservation plan is critical to maintaining the success, the agricultural capacity, and the overall livelihood of many of the folks here in Highlands County. I encourage you to support a countywide conservation plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The gentleman behind the lady standing up.
Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner. My name is Alan Rivero. I am a resident of Highlands County. I have grown up here my entire life. I could go on about the work I do. Clearly, I'm an environmentalist. I'm a conservation ecologist. I could talk about the Ridge all day, about its protected species, the things that are necessary for ecosystem resilience. But there are those here that are far more qualified than me to give that talk. Instead, I would like to talk about what it means to me to be a member of Highlands County. Growing up here, some of my first memories are of orange blossoms. Some of my first memories are of watching tortoises graze passively in a Bahia pasture lawn. Walking outside where I lived, 104 Launch Road, I'll never forget my childhood home, and lifting my hand out, having a scrub jay fall on down and eat a peanut out of my hand. These are things that are important to me. Aside from doing environmental work, I've also helped landowners run cattle, helped citrus growers plant, pick. I know the agricultural world. All of those systems are important to this county. It provides us a strong economic backbone, and it provides us a system for tourism as well. I fear development clenching in at every turn, and I fear that if we do not get a handle on this soon, my future as a voter of this county is in jeopardy. I grew up here. I did not get that choice. This was where the cards were dealt. But as a man in his 30s, a voter, I stayed here. I didn't stay here because new houses were getting built. I didn't stay here because a new gas station came in or the next movie is on the new theater. I came here and stayed here because I could look outside and watch a sunset highlighted by longleaf pines. I could walk outside and fish at any point, that I could drink from the hose without fear, that I could dig my toes into the sand without getting cut on glass, that I could walk without burning my feet on concrete. That's right, I'm a Floridian. I walk around barefoot as much as I can. I love this place. It's made me the man I am today. And I'm really proud of what you're doing here now. And I'm really proud of the future of Highlands County with more conservation at hand. With that, I yield the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The lady way back in the back.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alicia Dietrich. Good to see you all. I would like to take this time to speak in favor of this program. When I drive around Highlands County, I'm beset by beauty. The Spanish moss swaying in the wind off Arbuckle Creek, the fragrant oranges, the scent so strong you swim in it, you almost feel like you're floating in it. The silhouette of a cabbage palm, cows grazing in the background at sunset. All of these gifts can easily and be quickly found here in Highlands County. This program will help ensure that these moments can continue to happen. It will give the next generation a chance to love this life, to work the land, and to learn to appreciate it just as many of you have and I do. And really to become stewards of this area. The pace at which we are changing radiates a primal terror within me. With this program, we have a chance at building a more tranquil, nurturing future for our families. We'll place a value on relaxing in the shade of a tree, on meandering through a park with our household. This program won't just preserve the land, it'll preserve our lifestyle here.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? The gentleman right here, he's been sitting since we first started talking, I think.
Good evening, or good afternoon, Tom Palmer. I'm Chair of Ancient Island Sierra members in Polk Highlands, Hardy, DeSoto County. I've also been appointed to the Polk County Commission to the committee that oversees the purchase, make recommendations of the purchases of environmental lands. I'd like to make a couple points. One, keep in mind this is always a willing seller program, whatever you do, not grabbing anybody's land. Number two, there's a way to structure any taxes you levy so that you set aside an endowment for management, because it's very important. Some of the early programs fail to do that. And just generally, things have changed. I mean, first time I came to Highlands County was 1962 when I was a teenager, going to church camp at the former Lakebird Lodge. And my goodness, it's changed a lot since then. But I just encourage you to move forward and listen to people and proceed accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Right, let me get the guy in the blue shirt and then you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you so much for entertaining this workshop today. My name is Ken Keck. I'm at 34 Keck Drive down in Venus. And I've been communicating with you on other issues, but on this issue, I would like to first say I am a member, and thank you for appointing me to the Natural Resources Advisory Commission. I'm on my first several meetings there, and with Sam and Dawn coming to our meetings and shepherding this process, it's been very exciting to join this advisory commission at this time because of the prospects here. Tom has just stolen some of my thunder with regard to land management. The funds could be provided for that within the referendum, and then willing sellers and no one's being forced to give up any of their prized lands. So thank you for that, Tom. But Commissioner Tuck, you did make a statement earlier on that, 20 years of a bond issue could be well after we're all gone. And I think you made the point by saying that. And that is to say, as I drove here, through the high school, right by the Blue Street, those kids there who may want to raise their families here would have potential passive recreation, perhaps soccer field, into the future because of the actions of not only this commission in allowing this process to go forward, but ultimately the voters. And so I would also applaud you for allowing the people to speak on this issue, meaning the population of Highlands County, the voting population. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Ray Royce with Heartland Ag Coalition, Highlands County Citrus Growers Association. Obviously, it feels good to have all this focus on ag and working lands. So it's a little bit of a strategy difference we've seen. And those of us involved in agriculture obviously are always willing to visit with folks that want to talk about voluntary cooperative sales and easements versus using regulation to limit uses. So, I mean, it's a refreshing approach that it seems we're taking here. We're obviously very interested in how's the program get built out? Will there be payment for environmental services, for providing green space or water recharge, those types of things, wildlife habitats, corridors. So the men and women I work with, are interested in hearing how this all comes together before. I want to give credit to the folks that are putting this together. They did, as I said, they involved a number of people, including myself, and we had some very interesting conversations, about how this might all work. Obviously, one of the fears about adding to conservation lands is not only, as Mr. Talent pointed out, what it does to the tax rolls, but we also want to make sure that as we add conservation lands, that they do not limit the use of non-conservation lands. And so in your meeting earlier this morning, we saw someone say, hey, don't move forward with some development, don't move forward with some safety issues because we're concerned how it's going to negatively impact conservation land or the ability to burn. So those are the fears we have. But I think in total, it's always good to go and talk to the folks. The one thing that I don't understand, and perhaps it is just me from going to the NRAC meetings and being involved in all this, and I think in order to have a full and fair conversation with the citizenry, they need to understand, I think some of you all said, what is the benefits versus the cost? What is the pain point? And that means is that I don't have a good idea of, are we talking about additional ad valorem assessment? I thought we were talking about non-ad valorem assessments, not additional ad valorem millage rates. And so I think there's a big difference as I'm considering as a citizen, or as people are considering as citizens. Are we talking about additional millage, or are we talking about, I'm making up a number, a $50 per parcel non-ad valorem assessment, and understanding what that is? And then that changes the pain point depending on whether or not how your property is being assessed. So I would encourage the group that's doing this to get with you all, the ultimate decision makers, and say, as we're moving forward and we're explaining to the folks, how are we going to make those bond repayments? Will it be millage or will it be a non-ad valorem assessment? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ray. And it does say 0.20 mil ad valorem tax.
That's an example.
Yeah, that's an example.
Right.
But I would think that that's what they're talking about. I mean, it doesn't have to be 0.20, but Zach, I'm so sorry.
Well, I guess we're spending the whole day together, aren't we? No, well, I appreciate the board and Madam Chair for listening to everybody and for everyone sharing. And thanks Ramesh, Heather, Allison for making the drive down here, Dawn and Sam for all the work you guys are putting in on this. I'm Zach Franco with Archbold Biological Station. So we're a field station that has been in Highlands County for over 80 years. with the mission of building and sharing the scientific knowledge needed to protect the life, lands, and waters of Florida and beyond. The county and the Everglades headwaters, this is the focus of our long-term ecological studies of sustainable agriculture and the county's globally unique scrub ecosystems, has provided the foundation for highly popular regional and statewide conservation initiatives with immense bipartisan support, such as the Florida Wildlife Corridor Act, unanimously approved by the Florida Legislature in 2021, as mentioned. We encourage the board to continue this process to the community workshop stage. The planned workshops, facilitated by North Florida Land Trust, a statewide and nationally recognized leader in this work, would provide county citizens a venue to voice their opinions of the future of the county as we balance growth and resource protection. In addition, if eventually approved by voters, the program could financially support agricultural producers of Highlands County. Ranchers and producers face increasing challenges today. We know that firsthand as Archbold operates a 10,500-acre Buck Island ranch. Citrus decline, development pressures, thin margins, and changing climate patterns threaten agricultural viability and sustainability. Around 27,000 acres of Florida's natural and agricultural lands are being converted to development every year. If approved, Ridge to River would establish a financial tool and income opportunity for willing landowners to benefit financially from making the independent decision to conserve their land, in many cases while maintaining agricultural production. It is further important just to note that any conservation easements completed under an eventual Ridge to River plan, and these are easements, would keep the land on tax rolls and in private management. For these reasons, we encourage the board to approve this process and to move forward, and we appreciate the opportunity to comment and are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. The reason I told him thank you, I had a meeting with him after the meeting this morning, and I went to eat lunch instead. Anybody else have any questions or
I thought the reason
comments?
you said thank you was because most of the pictures were taken by him. I saw the photo credits.
Any more? Nobody else? I should have kept moving on, huh?
Hello, Jared Eddy, resident of Highlands County. I sit on the Highlands County Citrus Growers Board. I sit on the Highlands County Farm Bureau Board. Just beyond a farmer is what I would describe myself as. My family owns citrus groves in Lake Placid. In the last 2 or 3 years, I've probably lost $1 million in citrus with my business. I'm growing 30 acres of eggplant right now right on the border of Hardy County and Highlands County. I got $120,000 in 30 acres of eggplant right now. I won't pick for another 45 to 50 days. I'm out of pocket. $120,000. I'll probably be out of pocket $200,000 when the day I harvest my eggplant crop. This is real. This is God's honest truth. Me, the farmer, talking to y'all. I'm the real farmer. So I've heard a lot of talk today about, just a lot of discussions about agriculture. I'm 35 years old. I'm very young. No offense. I consider myself young. I got my wife's here. I was born and raised in Lake Placid. My wife was born and raised in Sebring. We have 2 young children that go to the public school system. I'm not a contractor. I'm not a developer. I'm not a road paver. I'm in agriculture, I live it, sleep, and breathe it every day. I love it. The problem is I have not been able to cash flow agriculture in this county in over 2 years. It is a very my business is negative. If you were to take my books to any accountant, any financial advisor, they wouldn't even take me on. I just hear today all this talk of agriculture. Show me one thing that's cash flowing in this county with agriculture. I'm not saying every business is, but you understand that the big picture. I got 55 seconds. The land values in Highlands County are going up every day. I think there's some property that is sold around Sebring for development in Avon Park, $30,000-$40,000 an acre. The last thing that I could see that for conservation, I think it closed within the last 30 days. It was the International Improvement Trust. No idea who that is. They're out of Tallahassee. I think it's something to do with FWC. They closed for $4,600 an acre. You see the difference there? You take 100 acres that you can sell for development, you can sell it for 30, 40 grand, 3, 4 million. You sell it for conservation, it's going for 8, 9,000. So I don't know the right answer, but just please understand the difference. You know, you're talking life-changing money for the farmer that's been losing money for the last couple of years if he sells for development, or literally he just sells for conservation and breaks even. So like I said, I don't know that I don't have the answers. I'm adding more problems to you, but I had to speak my mind and speak from the heart. If you have any questions, anybody, talk to me. I'm here. I am. I don't have any secrets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. I didn't realize we're only 3 years apart in age. That was good to know.
And my birthday tomorrow, I turned 1 year less.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, the lady in the back.
Sorry, I wasn't planning to speak, but something came forward that I want y'all to consider. My name is Gay Sharp. I'm in Polk County. I'm the Polk County Parks and Natural Resources Director, and we have an environmental lands program there. I want you to understand, because you make hard decisions all day long, what Polk County has done, not saying because every county is different, but we're looking at not maybe our scrub areas that would be suitable for this, but other areas where we're looking at stormwater projects mixed in with conservation projects, 2 different funding sources. We're able to do double work there. We also, we have a wastewater treatment plant. Nobody wants to live by a wastewater treatment plant that we've got to figure out where we're going to put it. So we're looking at areas where we could put a wastewater treatment plant, bring in conservation around that, and do these different scenarios. So I want you to understand you can be very creative with this program. And you have to be. Land is valuable to us in the future. So when we get a piece, we need to be looking at what other else we can do with that. But also you have to recognize the environmental, ecological importance. But there are some lands that are suitable for this, and we've done this in Polk County to some degree. So I just didn't want you to leave and not understand. We understand pressure on the commission totally with that. Just wanted you to understand there's also options. Thank you.
We appreciate it so much, and you might want to leave your name and number with the lady right here in the white and blue. We might need to get hold of you. Okay, anybody else? Going once, going twice. That's it. Okay, we're finished? Okay, so this workshop is now closed.
You guys have done a great job.